You're listening to Joe Dalton on Dublin South FM, Crossing the Rubicon.
And welcome, folks. Yes, it is again, as I say every week, another week here at the Joe Dalton Show at Dublin South FM. Every week we try and bring you a new guest with a new opinion, a new point of view, a new way of looking at things. And this week I have a very good friend of mine, a friend and someone who has educated me, helped me unlearn the truth, helped me stand in my own shoes. And now that I look at the world, I see it for what it is. This person is Lisa Temple.
So our creation story that we were given about Adam and Eve is not complete, even in the story that we were given. And an enormous amount of beautiful ancient texts were destroyed and or hidden. I would say more hidden than destroyed. The Alexander Library, etc. And you only have to look at the amount of stuff in the Vatican. So the people who have been dictating dogma to us in the corporation that is, for example, the church, and that's what it is, they have hidden a lot of knowledge from us. And they have manipulated a lot of the information that we were given to suit their business plan, is what I'll call it. While hypocritically, at the same time, at the highest echelons, practicing and behaving in a way that would be completely counter to what they were telling us to do, in accordance with their illuminated view on what the reality actually is. And that's very hard for people to come to terms with, because it's the amount of lies that we have been told since the day we were born, the amount of twisted, inverted truths, the amount of hypocritical, do as I say, not as I do behavior, which we've even seen in the last year in our faces. We're all locked down, they're playing golf. We're locked down and, they're all having parties. That behavior has been going on since the beginning of the formations of the structures. And now this is all coming to fore. So in the beginning, there was an idea. If there was an idea, there had to be consciousness. Consciousness was creative. It's not static. It's unknowable. It's unfathomable. It's untouchable. It's inexplicable. It's only something that can be experienced. And the confidence to be able to say, I know because I have experienced, has been robbed from a lot of people. So if you can't measure it, define it, give a quippy statement towards it, then people dismiss it as being nothing. But when you know something, you have no need to defend it. You've no fear of scrutiny, and you've no concern about your belief system, because the knowing is bigger than belief. So I don't know whether you want me to go through the Adam and Eve story, but one of the things I'm particularly fascinated with is, in the beginning, there was Adam and Lilith. Adam and Lilith as concepts, and they had the initial breakup in a marriage, and he cried out and was given the clone, which was Eve, who he then allowed to be raped, and she had Cain and Abel, and a whole bloodline came from that. And Lilith then became demonized as the divine feminine, to the degree that, for example, boys were circumcised and certain rituals happened in order to actually pull them away. I believe fundamentally, Joe, that it's a woman's job to rebirth a man back to spirit, and it's a man's job to ensure that a woman and children walk the earth safely. And there seems to be a thought pattern in this world that wants to make sure that that doesn't happen. The Gnostic belief system would be that there is an all-encompassing consciousness, and in our attempts to explain it, wisdom, which would be Sophia, and her logos, which would be the Christ mind. She, because she is wisdom, realized that she required experience in order to expand her knowledge. And this construct was created through her. She left her logos, she left her Sinisi, her partner, which was the Christ logos, in order to create an environment where consciousness could enter in pinpoint views through different aspects of life, and then go through the arduous journey of temptation and having to choose between fear and love in order to rediscover itself, to bring back to the all the experience of this life, which is not easy. I mean, to take consciousness, which is unfathomable and huge and all knowing and all of that, and put it into a little meat body, it's a tough road. And we're very, very brave to have come here.
In this construct that was created, why was it created as it is? And when it was created as well, what in the beginning, we're talking about the origins of the world and the perspective of the story, we talk about, Sophia, and then we have Pistis, which is fate, and then you have the archons, which are the energies of lust, desire, and which then tip into Greek mythology as well, and the creation of heaven at the footsteps of earth. Can you explain all that? Can you go into a little bit more detail on that?
Well, you're touching on the Gnostic creation myth there. So one of the things that sets it apart from other varieties of early Christianity is that it has this astonishing creation analogy or myth, while it also is aware that you cannot explain the inexplicable. So there's that tension. The Catholic Church likes us to just go, this believe this, and this, and this is actual fact the way it is. So transubstantiation, you are eating the body and blood of a man who sacrificed himself for your sins. I mean, we were shoved down our throat, and I found that quite traumatic as a child. I fundamentally felt that the body and blood and that was cannibal. It was cannibalism. It just felt, without engaging my brain, my child instinct was, there's something wrong here. Just in the same way that I felt I never asked anybody to be crucified for my sins. It made me feel shame. So it was all set about, believe this as it is, don't question it, and then your behavior was modified by that. So the Gnostics fundamentally say, well, we cannot explain knowledge. We can't, it's only to be experienced. But here is a framework of mythology, of analogy that might trigger in you the unstruck sound of knowing memory that's within your essence. But it's not to be taken literally. So some people find, if you take things literally, that the creation myth to be kind of bizarre. Some people say it's blasphemy, others say it's exhilarating and inspiring. If something doesn't connect with that part of you that feels like, it just feels like a familiar vibration, and then when you go and turn to your friend and try to explain it, the words don't come, then you're probably on the right track, especially if you feel it lifts you and repositions you back into a sense of wholeness, where you feel home and safe and enough. You're probably on the right track. If you can explain it to somebody else, you're probably gone off track again. But the Gnostic creation summary in brief is that there was the all that is, or the Father, and he gave host to aeons, and that it exists within the pleroma, which is the fullness, which is eternal and inexplicable. And that gnosis, that pleroma is nothing, but is all. And that can create a challenge for people, because they've been sold the story of heaven and hell and purgatory and nirvana and all of this. And that kind of is tangible to them. But when you start saying that your true consciousness and state is actually part of nothing, then for people who believe matter is all that matters, they actually get a panic, because they feel that that's non-existence. But it's not. It's the actual opposite. And in fact, the matter is the illusion. And the deeper you go down through the atom, and with the developments in superstring theory, etc., you realize that, we don't actually exist outside being pure vibration. But the journey of Sophia and the demiurge, who was the craftsman or the great architect or Jehovah, and then didn't realize or didn't remember his own divinity because he was born in ignorance, and then created the first man and woman, who was Lilith and Adam. And then the bloodline from Eve happens. There is a group of people then who are of bloodline elite mentality, who are very, very interested in these creation myths and are modifying their behavior and trying to modify the behavior of humanity in order to fit in with that belief system, which I think fundamentally is each of them trying to feel, to avoid the fear of the nothingness, and hang on to what they believe is tangible, and control, which is all fear-based. But the willingness that humanity has had to hand over their power in order to fulfill ridiculous desires has made them much more powerful than they should be, because they're actually completely impotent.
That's one way of putting it.
When I use the word impotent, I'm using it in view of the Latin word and potere, meaning power. So if anybody has done martial arts, you realize that, if you're a small person and you go into battle with somebody who's more stronger than you, that you can't hit them force on force because they have a stronger force. You have to access a chi, a prana, a life force of power, and use that with creative unpredictability. And then the force falls. But we are at the moment, force is being used on us, on people who have been disempowered. But the only people that use force to that degree are people who themselves feel powerless. And no amount of money, no amount of control is ever going to fill that black hole if you don't have a connection. So it's a bit like they're all connected to a battery, and that battery is fueled by people's consent to give over their power and their forgetting of who they are. So there's always a fear they'll wake up. So you have to keep controlling. Or you are connected to the mainframe source, and you don't need to control or feed off other people.
Here's my observation of it, is that source energy, through spirit, through Sophia, through the demiurge, whoever created this construct. And in this construct, there is the God and there is the angels. And we have, over centuries and centuries and centuries have been driven to believe in this God and these angels, and who are called in this bubble. So you have a circle, and in the circle you have us and this, the God and the angels and the demiurge and all the archon energies and all this in this circle. And we have been tricked or driven down a path that these are the ones that we should be worshipping and looking after and praying to. And these entities or these energies or whatever it may be don't care if you kneel and pray and look up into heaven, or in some mad freaky place somewhere sacrifice a child. They don't care. They just want to be worshipped with pride and ever.
They don't exist without our attention.
Yeah.
They don't care the quality of that intention. In fact, they live in a dualistic world. The entire matter is dualistic. So if you believe you are of matter, then you're going to be caught up in that dualistic world. And I remember watching that movie, The Matrix, and, everyone talks about it. And Neo was sitting down and Orpheus said to him, he was starting to be aware that what he saw wasn't what was real. And Orpheus said to him, you can have a red pill or a blue pill. And I remember thinking he should tell Orpheus to shove his pills. He doesn't need to be red or blue pilled. That was an enormously impactful, sort of a twisted Gnostic view of the requirement for an external way of enlightenment. You do not become enlightened by reading books or by listening to YouTube videos or by studying. You become enlightened by sitting still and going through the layers of that you avoid into your core. I mean, there should be probably the most enlightened people would be a tribe of people who lived on the earth and never had access to a book in their life, but they lived in rhythm with each other and with nature in a smaller community of about 120 people, because beyond that, you kind of can't live in a community. And nature, humans are unique in the fact that they did live in those type of tribes until this, if you like, archon, bug-like hive mentality, pyramidal infrastructure seemed to consistently interfere with humanity and impose its thinking on it. And the reason for that, I think, is if we didn't have those tensions and those dichotomies of existence, we wouldn't have free will and we wouldn't have temptation. I think free will is the absolute gift that we have here at the moment, and it's been completely underestimated and overridden. But then with free will becomes responsibility. So the red pill, blue thing. And then I looked at, Trump versus, what's his face, Biden, red versus blue, Coca-Cola versus Pepsi, Man United versus Liverpool, Leo versus Mary. It's all about duality. And while you look out and you see a dualistic world and you're on one side or the other, you're not sitting still and being your authentic self.
Yeah, it's the both sides.
Like, I hate the word wake up. It has irritated me because having worked for a company like Microsoft, I've sat around tables where they come up with logos, stay home, stay safe. These mantras that they get people to repeat.
That's a new age thing, Lisa.
Well, new age was developed by the same people who developed COVID. I mean, the same groups of people. New age is probably one of the most dangerous, I think, diversions that are happening at the moment because of all of the important issues facing humanity at the moment, whether it's climate change, the question on abortion, the question on homosexuality, has been taken over, used, manipulated, and harnessed for the business plan.
Yeah, I'm going to touch on New Age in a sec. Just going to jump back to the origin of the world where we were talking about that circle and all these non-existent or existing because of consciousness are in it. And if we give it a thought, it's there and it exists. But it's the other part then, which I've learned, is that none of it matters because it's all just in this construct. That the real truth of everybody who really wants to understand who their own divine, their own spirit, is connecting with their own spirit inside. And that spirit inside then is connecting to that life force energy. So that's the only connection. So I'm using it myself as an example, a line down the middle of the page. On the right, you have all the gods and the angels and the archons and everything which was created, Jehovah and all in this one box. And then on the other box, you have spirit to source, divinity, energy, and you're down the bottom. And you can choose which way, free will, you can choose which way you want to go. Is that red pill and blue pill?
That's an interesting concept. So there's two different forms of duality. One is where you live on the earth and there's a God and there's a devil and there's good and there's evil and there's that battle going on. So that's the duality within the construct. And then there's another, I suppose, type of duality on a higher level, which is there is the spirit world and the matter world. And that's why some of the ancient people were accused of being anti-matter, anti-birth, but it wasn't so much that. They just recognized that matter was a vehicle for the human spirit to rediscover itself. And they weren't saying matter was evil. The whole concept of what is evil is interesting in itself. They were just saying it is not our true spirit. And we should honor the journey that we are on, but never forget where we are from, never forget home, or to try to remember it. And then it brings in the concept of reincarnation, Joe. And that's a whole, where the soul has come down. And I would summarize the journey of the soul is like, or the journey of spirit through the soul as being another vehicle is first you knew, then you were frightened into pretending you forgot. Then you forgot you were pretending. Then you forgot you ever knew. Remember?
But here's the thing, just so people can understand. Spirit and soul are different.
I see it as different. I see spirit as being connected to the all and everything that is indefinable. That is, I call it home. And I see, and this is, I don't want to upset people, but I see the soul is what happened when spirit came here into a person. And then that person was in shock, literally, because to come here and to be separate and go through the veil of the Maya forgetfulness is shocking. And the first time you cry as a baby and someone doesn't come, you're going to realize or believe that you are vulnerable, and it creates the first big shock. And then that creates the ego. And then there's great books talking about the ego in order to, it feels disconnected from source, and it's quite childlike, and it goes to a place of either an aloof, an interrogator, an intimidator, or a poor me when it feels it hasn't got sufficient energy, and it interacts with other egos in that way to kind of battle for a small resource of energy because it's part of almost like a battery rather than be connected to source. And then when you run through life forgetting more and more about that original connection, and life does give you moments where it's trying to gently nudge you and remind you and give you grace, doesn't interfere, but will hand you moments and say, inviting you gently back into your authentic self. But then the construct, if you like, is saying, oh no, do this job and do that job and you get paid. So you're constantly being tempted in one way. And there's a little bell ringing in the background that can become really faint if you don't listen to it, kind of saying, this is the way home through the fog. And when you come to die, then, if you don't know how to die because you haven't done it every day, which we're supposed to, your conscious belief system then will continue on in the construct beyond death. So you'll be aiming to go to heaven or to hell or to nirvana or whatever it is that you believe in. And the construct doesn't really care whether you're on a journey to hell or heaven. It doesn't care as long as you're going to remain there. So in books like the Nag Hammadi, for example, there's discussions about the steps that happen when you die. And if you haven't worked out the illusions while you're alive, well, the last 3 minutes of your life, you've it's a lot to process. And shame is really the biggest thing that people avoid. And if you are so set on a belief system which have been shoved down your throat, then you're going to aim to go to heaven or hell. And that's then where the soul is created. And then it's almost as if the soul becomes anchored in the construct beyond the physical dimension. And then within that, the soul then contracts to come back down again and try and learn again. But you're basically being recycled. And your job is not to get to heaven. Your job is to remember who you are and to then gather up your experience, your compassion, and the joy of the experience of the ride and bring it back home to the pleroma, to Sophia, to consciousness, to expand it through your experience.
You're listening to Joe Dalton on Dublin South FM, Crossing the Rubicon.
What I see it as that when spirit, us, come here, and then all those reincarnations, we keep coming back to discover that if people can get their head around that everything outside of this world, there's no such thing as time. So all those experiences of all those reincarnations that people have had, they're happening at once. So I see the spirit as a shopping bag, and every experience, it's collecting all this data, information, whatever it may be. And at a time when it figures out, that the soul figures out that they remember, I remember now, and now I need to get to source, and source goes, right, we're done here, everything we're done, I've gathered all the information. That shopping bag all at once with all those reincarnations then go to source for source to expand. So it's happening, everything is happening now in a split, I can't say time because time doesn't exist, but I think people know what I'm getting at, that then the bag is dumped. But the construct is so caught on itself and its creation. There's the 7 realms that spirit needs to get through with the shopping bag. It's like a dash for, what was that generation game? You remember that? You used to run around with the trolley and grab everything, and that it has to really remember that I need to get through this with the shopping bag. And those 7 realms are all to do with tempt, ego, addiction, and attraction of, oh, here you are. The next time you come here, you'll be this or you'll be that, and it'll be amazing or whatever it may be. And the temptation of the touch, the feel, the smell,
senses,
which got us here, is thrown at us, and you have to kind of go, you know what? I'm done with all these. I've figured it out. I'm just going home.
Yeah.
Would that be a good sort of analogy?
Well, if it feels like resonance for you, Joe, it is. And I would never dictate to anybody. I love discussing ideas. I love when one of my beliefs are given a new perspective. I live for that. I live to be wrong every day, because it actually makes
That's easy.
Yeah, it makes me happy when I say, oh, it's this. And, I'm blessed. I have two fantastic daughters, and they know who they are in such a beautiful way. And they have no problem in challenging. And we have a lot of philosophical discussions in our house, and they're much cleverer than I am, and have greater skill sets than I do. And I feel very humble to be around them. But in the view of Gnosticism, which I'm interested in all different belief systems, because there's always elements of truth in all of them. And at the end of the day, the only truth, as I said, is in your own knowing. But they would talk about 3 different types of human beings. And this is a very interesting concept. But in some ways, I find it very comforting. But it's very important not to fall into the trap of seeing one as better or superior than the other, because the human mind and the ego, which is fearful and not connected, can only see things in terms of judgment. So there's always this thing of hierarchy, or something is more spiritual or less spiritual, or more awake or less awake. And I don't see it like that. And I want to make that clear before I discuss this. But there is this concept of the 2 fundamental different types of humans, and one of them have 2 subtypes. And it comes from Greek words. So the hylic would be considered, like in psychological terms, as somatic. And the hylic were literally part of the construct and program. So in terms of, if it was a construct, or using the analogy of a video game, they would be non-player characters. So they are bound completely to matter, the material world, everything above the atom. And they are driven by eating and sleeping and mating and creative comforts. And they're not good or bad people, but depending on their, how they behave, or what level of that they are vibrating at, that they require. They just are generally, part of this construct. Then the other type, so they would be meat bodies with an ego, and they wouldn't be considered to have a soul or connected to spirit. They are literally part of the construct. And then the second type would be considered the psychic, and that comes from, again, a Greek word meaning, it's of the heart. It's of the mind and heart, or the heart mind. So a psychic would be considered a person who has a physical body, has an ego, and has a soul that is anchored within the construct. And then there's also a thread to spirit, but they would be possibly have gone around and around and around and around through the construct, through different stages of life and birth, or even different dimensional existences, trying to remember who they are. But in the meantime, feeding the construct from its creative energy and not realizing it or serving it. And then there's the pneumatics, and the pneumatics, coming from that Greek word of kind of air, would be pneuma, or spirit or breath, are comprised of beings who come here once, are very connected to source, because they haven't got the attachment to earth or earthly things. And they're like a reference point to kind of say to people, remember, remember, remember. So that concept was something I found very intriguing. And I think, then you're wondering, well, what percentage of who is what? And it was very hard. I would have always assumed that, say, 96% of people are psychics, and there might be maybe 2% hylics and 2% pneumatics. However, in the last 2 years, with the invitation to contract with the construct that has been offered under the guise of the COVID cult belief system, it's almost as if the entire construct itself, the entire video game matter-based reality, has blown a whistle. And all of those who are of the construct have heard that whistle. And it has religious almost undertones. It's like their God, which would be the God of matter, or the ultimate AI, or the demiurge, has called them home. And they were adrift up until that happened. And suddenly they were being told what to do. They felt part of a group. They had meaning to their life, and COVID almost gave them a meaning to their life. And then I noticed people who were like, sorry, what is going on? This is bizarre. This doesn't make sense. This doesn't match with my knowing of what makes sense health-wise, economic-wise, social-wise. It doesn't make sense. And all of a sudden, it's like, are 90% of people or 80% of people of the construct? And are there only a smaller amount of people who have been maybe here many, many times? And then are there the people who are here once and seem to have a great knowing about who they are? And I'm really reluctant to judge, but I have friends that I've had for a long, long time and been presenting this concept to them and talking about the philosophy of what's been going on in the last 2 years. I've had people that I know a long, long time say, oh, I'm a Heilig. I'm here for me. I will go along with the system. I can't understand how you would go against it. And when I die, I just turn to dust. That's it. So I'm just here for the good time and thing. And then I've spoken to other people and they'll say, oh no, I think I'm definitely a psychic. I remember past lives. I'm familiar. I know something, but I'm not brave enough to do it. And then pneumatics are very rare. But it does appear that there might be some foundation of truth in that. And rather than moving into a position of judging, which humanity tends to do, where everybody wants to be a psychic or a pneumatic and looks down on the Heiligs, it's not that simple. Everybody has its place and its meaning in a game that is ultimately there beyond our comprehension by something that is incomprehensible, but is truly familiar when you connect to it as home. That there is a reason for this being the way it is, and it leads to compassion. So I have discovered over the last while that when I accept that people are acting true to their nature by following, as Bill Gates said, technology will lead humanity over the cliff it deserves, which is quite frightening because they believe in the evolution to actually merge with the construct in the ultimate AI existence as being the evolution of mankind. And then you've another one saying, this totally is unnatural to me. Maybe they're all being true to themselves. And when you listen carefully to Bill Gates, when you listen carefully to Elon Musk and to Davos and to CERN, they're telling us the truth. And they have an ideology that we should move away from love, away from life, away from the unpredictability of nature into a controlled hive. And he's being really honest. So I don't know how you feel about that, Joe. And it's just, I don't want to engage in the judgmental labeling of humans that seems to be happening for people. I can feel safe not having information or words to explain what I know. So if somebody says to me, how do you know you love that person? I can sit there and smile. I don't ever feel I need to defend it.
No, it's not defending anything, but I've always believed that, there has always been a small amount of spiritual divinity or whatever you want to call it, people on this world and everyone. And then there's a large amount, which are the Heiligs, as you say. And that could be, if I'm in the airport, the people that I know or people who I bumped into, say, in an airport. And all the people vastly out there running around doing all the stuff are non-existent because they're just part of this construct for me to learn and for me to remember and for me to have my own experience. And that's why I think with what's going on at the world, I see it for what it is, but I also see it that it's happening for me to help me. And it's to help me to have compassion, to, forgive myself and forgive others. And the one thing that I'm really trying to get my head around now at the moment is really losing complete judgment, because this is showing that there is judgment and humanity judges. So that's where I'm always saying
and the judgment is always superior or inferior. And it goes back to what you said originally about that feeling of lack. So when you're in judgment, you're saying, am I enough or am I not enough constantly? But when you fall through all of those layers and you land on the soft palm of the hand of consciousness, then you realize that if you are courageous enough to identify your own judgments, external judgments, and own them as part of your own internal misdirection, then you don't have time really to judge other people. But that being said, in the last year and a half, the masks in particular, I mean, the human face, I think, is the soul. It shows somebody's soul and personality, and their eyes hold the spirit. And I've found that as traumatic as I found to walk around a sea of people pulling a dirty mask out of their face to social virtue signal, whereas some of them are genuinely concerned and fearful, and I respect that. But 90% of people, I mean, the logic is out the window in the way they've been
there's the whole look. It's the whole science base.
All you can see now is eyes, and in those airports or in those crowds, you can stand and you can look around, and now you can actually spot the people with spirit. You can see it in the twinkle of an eye. You can see it in the face. I know that there are people on both sides of the duality. You know, we've been forced into pro and against everything. You're either racist or you're non-racist, or you're this or you're that or you're this. And if you're outside of that game, they both hate you. You know, they want you. They don't care if you're Man United or Liverpool, but don't go in and question the game in the middle of the pitch, because, you know, the media are earning, the players are earning. One side's shouting at Man United, the other night shouting at Liverpool. And if you walk into that pitch and go, sorry, guys, you're paying how much money to these people? And there's people starving outside, everybody will tear you apart.
Yeah.
So it's either get in on the game or do not show us that game.
Withdrawal.
Yeah, because if you show them it's a game, it pulls the foundation of their belief under them, and then they feel they're falling down into nothing. But when you walk around at the moment, everything has been revealed. The level of horror that underlies and underpins and glues together the top of the pyramidal infrastructure, the billionaires, the trillionaires, the celebrities, you know, the so-called elite, what they have engaged in to maintain their position is so beyond the comprehension of what it means to be a human being, in terms of abuse, in terms of the sexual abuse of children, in terms of the grooming of young boys through private schools so that they will be in a position of authority that they can manipulate it, the destruction of their masculine divine energy, the destruction of the feminine divine energy, in order to keep that pyramid in place. It is absolutely horrific. And they have brought it all out in the public eye now. It's brought out through the media, through the celebrities. We saw through Epstein. Have no doubt that our world and the people that we see as giving directions are compromised. Every single one of them, and owned and slaved in ways that we cannot imagine. Now, it may be just that they turned their back and didn't say anything when they saw things happening. It may be that they participated in, you know, unethical financial dealings. It may be that there's photographs of them having an affair. It may be that their childhood private school sexual abuse was triggered as adults into behaving in ways that was then, you know, glazed over with some sort of esoteric man-boy love type of thing. But that is the glue that holds them all together. They are slaves. If you take the pyramidal structure that is the power structure in the world and you invert it upside down, you've got Dante's hell. And at the tip of Dante's hell are the politicians, the hypocrites, the traitors, the billionaires, the business people. So we may look up at them, and I don't envy them because I've lived a life where, you know, I've had an enormous amount of money and I've been around people with money and I've never seen anything as miserable of them. So I know that the more that they have, the less satisfied that they are. And they're the type of people that would drive by in a limousine and see a beggar eating a donut, closing his eyes as if he was in heaven, and actually have the phthónos, the Greek word, that deep archonic envy of human spirit. And it's, if there was one thing in the world that I would say is the foundation of evil, it's envy. Why do people sexually abuse children? They envy their innocence. They want to eat their innocence. They want to eat their life force. Why do people have to have a better car? Because they envy the person next door. If there was one thing that could be eliminated from this earth, it is envy. The envy of human spirit is what drives desire and the archon and the entire construct. And these people at the top level, which we don't even know their names, and it's definitely not Bill Gates, they are puppets. They detest the people that are serving them more than they detest the people. They don't detest the people who say no. They're fascinated. Right now, they are more interested in observing those people who have stood in their truth. And I don't mean the ones that have went off to protests and screamed obscenities and at the opposite side and called one side Antifa and the other side pedophiles and I hate you and I hate you. They are two cheeks of the same arse. I'm talking about the people who have stood in their truth and said, I will die before I will concede my spirit and submit to you. They are the only people that they are interested in. And they are as interested as their scientists are in CERN in Switzerland, smashing atoms together to try and find the God particle. And they are so naive because the act of observing creates. If you have the most powerful microscope in the world and you go diving down through the atom to find the God particle, the more powerful your microscope, the more you're going to see ad infinitum, because the act of observing creation, it's pathetic. So they cannot find consciousness and it drives them crazy. The other thing they can't work out is dysentropy. So entropy is when you smash a glass and all the pieces shred outwards and they have a projection. That's entropy. That's chaos. Dysentropy is to bring all of those pieces back in, and it's to do with the comprehension of time. So they can't work out time, they can't work out gravity, and they cannot create, destroy, or predict consciousness. And that is driving them crazy because they don't have the connection to spirit. Even if they denote themselves as being elite, the only thing that has put them in the positions they are is their innate understanding of how to tempt a human being out of its spirit and feed you. That is the only thing that they are good at. They understand the psychology of humanity because they have observed it. Their empires have fallen and they have grown, and they have fallen and they have grown. Now they have the internet. They have a digital, which is not human, which is not natural. It is from somewhere else. A digital network connection of every human mind having captured not the territory of land. They don't care about land anymore. They want your mind attention. It is the new spoils of war. And they have connected everybody globally to that. But you know what? They don't care about anyone who consents to them. They'll pay them, they'll use them, and then they'll kill them off. They care about you who is saying, do you know what? Shoot me, kill me, arrest me. I won't fight with you. I don't care, because what I have inside is not negotiable. And that drives them mad, Joe. When you can buy anything except consciousness and human spirit, then the level of dissatisfaction is beyond comprehension. Because there is no amount of money that Bill Gates could come to me and pay me to sell him my spirit, not my soul. I'm not even interested in that. In fact, I want to go back to spirit, forget about the soul. I'd say, no, Bill, you're grand. Thanks. And that drives them crazy.
Yeah, and I think that's where it fits in to, you know, the Heilig or the hive mentality, and then the spirit mentality as well. And that's why I've always believed it's a small amount of people, and everyone else and everyone I meet, I believe, is of the same, and we're all God's children or created children.
Can we look at Ireland just for one moment, Joe? I just want to say something about the demographics of Ireland.
Yeah.
If you look, and I'm not accurate here in my figures, they're very approximate, but if you look at whatever, we 5 million people. How many are working for the IT industry? maybe 1 million, 1.2 million.
Yeah.
Directly or indirectly. How many are working for big pharma? Maybe the same. It's a huge industry here. How many are working for the state?
The state's the biggest employer. So, yeah.
So when you add all of them up and their dependents, and then you've got the elderly, and then you've got the unemployed who are working for the state as well, they're owned by the state. How many people are not contracted to the construct?
500,000.
If even. And then we've got 90 million diaspora. And then we have our location. And then we have the esoteric belief system they have about the tribe of Dan, the lost tribe of Israel, and, you know, whether Ireland has a 33rd state, and, you know, why did the British Israelites come over and dig up Tara looking for the Ark of the Covenant? And it's not about what we believe, it's what they believe. So Ireland is very significant, and they had to groom our politicians from children to be where they are right now. And they've chose them by either their active participation, how they were groomed, what school they went to, what clubs what handshakes they did, or whether they were the type of person that would keep their mouth shut for their pension. So they are all there for a certain reason at the moment. And this was planned a long, long time ago. And if you look back to the Roman empires and Tacitus, and he talked about how the northern tribes were barbaric because they would run into war with no fear of death. That didn't make them barbaric. The Romans believed that there was an equality of reasonable choice between fear and love. So if you did something out of fear, they felt that was, you know, an acceptable excuse. The northern tribes did not give themselves the luxury of having fear as an option. Everything was from love, but love is not the Hollywood word. It's they knew that they were more than their body. They honor and the love of their family, the love of their freedom gave them a coraggio, a courage that came from their heart, as opposed to the bravado that the Romans had, who were ultimately living in fear and like a hive mind. And when those two tribes clashed, you know, the Romans played dirty tricks because they didn't have values. So when the northern tribes went to attack the Romans and they hid in their forts, and then the northern tribes went back and they were bathing and eating with their families, and then the Romans would do a dirty attack when their arms and weapons were down, it was the women who stood up and fought and ultimately killed themselves and the men and their children rather than become slaves of the Roman Empire, because they knew what that meant. And for them, they had such a thin line between life and spirit that death wasn't fearful, living on their knees as a slave was. Now, the Roman Empire energy is now invading Ireland again, or I'm not saying the Roman Empire, but that empirical energy, the globalist energy now it is. And where is our men? Where is that spirit? They have made damn sure through years of abuse, sexual abuse in particular, in Ireland, we know that, breaking people down, moving them away from working with the land and putting them at a desk with a computer, making them apologize for being a man, shaming women for being women, to the point now that you're nearly afraid to even say whether you're a man or woman. You're better to be some sort of a transgender. They have literally broken us down. And when Australia recently had those big construction men that went out, you know, this big energy that went out, they're probably the last group of people that are, you know, physically strong. That kind of might have worried them a lot. And then there was an earthquake, you know, and nature almost rose up to meet the divine masculine. And that scares these people because they don't have the capacity to control nature. You know, Bill Gates and all of them, they can go down into their underground facilities. But if an asteroid hit them or a flood hit them, they'll be sealed in there and they will die together. And I know if I had a choice of going underground and surviving with the likes of those or staying up and taking my chances, I wouldn't be going down.
Yeah.
And then they're talking about, well, then we'll build a rocket and we'll fly up out of space because they're terrified of Mother Nature. And Mother Nature will assist human spirit if human spirit rises. But where is the Irish human spirit? Who is left? And I believe that the square root of 1%, a tiny figure of Irish people, if they had come together. So when you meet the Gardaí and they're like, sure, we don't agree with this, but we just have to go along with it. So let's play the game of where you're going. And you're like, why are you going along with it? Sure, they're totally impotent, totally disempowered. It is all contract law. If we taught our children in school how to pray, how to die, not to be afraid of it, who they are as spirits, how to know the difference between their wants and their needs, and contract law and philosophy, this wouldn't happen.
You're talking, it reminds me of the Brehon, old ancient Ireland, the people, the Brehon, who taught all this and walked the lands, and that has been pulled.
You're listening to Joe Dalton on Dublin South FM, crossing the Rubicon.
We're coming to, look, as we said before this, we could talk for hours on this, but I want to try and just wrap this up here for this time, and hopefully you'll come on again. And there's 3 things I want to ask you, all right, which I believe will tie in to this. One is explaining Tesla 369 theory, and then it's our chakras, okay? And then the last question then on it, now you can tie them whatever way you want, is what's next? Everyone being individual, like what can I do today? What can Mary across the road today? What can Bill, who's worried about his family in Cork or in Germany or in America, do tomorrow?
Well, Tesla said, if you understand the magnificence of 3, 6, and 9, you'll understand the universe. I have a suspicion, although I never met the man, that he had a knowing that he then spent a lifetime trying to translate in scientific terms. And the 369 could be considered the key of the universe. What he actually meant could be interpreted in many different ways. You could consider hylics are 3, psychics are 6, pneumatics are 9, for example. But he pushed the boundaries of science and technology and philosophy. And even by asking a question or by making a statement like he did without explaining it, if you just take that sentence that he said and take that as an entry into, I wonder what he means on a journey, I would say that what he said was an invitation for people to stop and consider that maybe there is more to them and to life than they have been told.
Yeah, good point.
You look at the atom, for example, you've got protons, neutrons, electrons, you've got trinities, you've got, what is the trinity? Is it Sophia and Lilith? And is Lucifer the frozen Sophia? And not what we're told it is. Is there that, you've the devil, you've Satan, you've Lucifer. Are they the same thing? We kind of were told they were, but are they? Is Satan the inner demon that we feed by moving consistently from need to want? And the more you move to want, do you create something that almost feels like satanic, and they've externalized that? Is the devil, for example, something that's beyond our dimensional view in terms of the construct that is life, that we can, by creating a certain vibration, do a deal with? We have many examples in literature of the Faustian deal. Is that what the devil is? Is it, as some people call it, the Quranzan? Is it the hive mind? Is it the bug? What is the devil? And what is Lucifer? And when you look at those 3 things, most people will say, oh, they're all the same. So when you start on the journey, what Tesla said, and I'm not going to go into what I think Tesla meant, but making a statement that makes people question and pause is good. And I have my own personal view on what Tesla was talking about, which I'm not going to undermine by trying to fit it into the last few minutes now, Joe. So
yeah,
anything that makes you stop and question what you believe and perceive is an invitation from grace home. And all you have to do then is have the courage to pause your attachment to your beliefs and go into the wild, magnificent world of miracle, which is a totally different world to magic. Above the atom is magic. But I could do a sleight of hand trick that you think is magic just because you don't have all the information. And then there is learning how to play the game so that the game gives you something, but that's contract and you need to know what it's going to cost you. And then there's miracle. And miracle is the expression of life itself. It's love. It's that indescribable knowing of who you are. And we need to move back into that. I've personally no interest in getting involved in the world of magic, black magic, white magic, good, evil. To me, it is an invitation to participate in a game which is only in existence because we give it attention and is fully based on desire. And as regards those people who have been lured into stepping so far away from their human spirit by being bombarded with occult information and ritual into thinking that do as thou wilt has no consequences, my heart goes out to them, because in the last 3 minutes of their life, they are going to realize that they have to do all the work then that they've avoided for many, many lifetimes, and that there are consequences that they can't even imagine, and that the ultimate liar has lied to them. And I only feel compassion for those people. They call themselves elite. As I said, it's not very elite when you turn it up the right way and look at Dante's hell. And hell is a construct of our own mind making. But you can't bring anybody across the river, like the frog and the scorpion. The transformational process back into your true authentic self is a very personal one. And what Joe might find difficult to cross over in terms of your own heart and your own shame, I might think is nothing. But for you, it's the same as having to fall off a building with your hands behind your back onto your face and believe you're not going to be hurt. It's that huge. So the compassion that's required for people behaving in a fearful, often cruel way, it's purely based on fear and forgetting who they are. So that's the first question. Chakras is the second question. So we have this view of describing the anatomy of being called chakras, which comes from ancient, Vedas and wisdom. So you have, and I'd like to draw this, but I can't on radio. So you have a person and you have 7 energy points, and each of those energy points has a color vibration, and each color is a different level of vibration. So if you can imagine the 7 energy points with the heart in the middle and a line through the heart, and everything below that line is untransformed and everything above that line is transformed. In other words, everything below the line of the lower heart chakra would be part of what I would call the above the atom material world. And everything above the half line of the heart chakra is more into the quantum world of spirit. Okay. So your root chakra, can be in an expanded or a contracted form. Its color is red and it's related to the earth. So it's like a tree. So if your root chakra is healthy and expanded, then from a baby, you've been told you're home and you're safe and you're enough. And that has also been reflected not just from your family, but in your community, in your education system, in your government, and globally, and in everything you see on the television. Now, already we know rubbish. People are told the total opposite, but that's how it should be in its expanded form. On the left-hand side, if you are not, then you are feeling lost, lack of abundance, disconnected, which is the goal of the construct of the pyramidical architecture that we live under to make us feel, to damage that root chakra. The second chakra then would be related to the element of water and emotion and prana, and it's the creative chakra. It's not just the sexual chakra, it's you making a cake or coming up with a creative solution to a problem, or it's just that creative nature. If it's expanded, it is attractive. It has that kind of spiritual oil to it. It's called uja, like the juice, where it just glows. And you can see people like that. They are glowing and they are creative. Now, the opposite, when it's contracted, the opposite to creativity is depression. So it's infertile, it's depressed, and it can't really come up with creativity. The third chakra, being the color yellow, vibrationally, is the mental body. So you have the physical, the emotional, the mental body, and these are going inward. So the physical body and the root chakra is the densest form of light because the particles are vibrating. The energy is vibrating so fast that it feels like it's solid, but it's not. Second chakra then is more subtle energy body. It's the pranic body. And the third one then is the mental body. It's more subtle again. And that's why an illness that happens, like say psoriasis, if that's out on your skin and then you kind of push it in through modern medicine, you often get asthma, and you push it in, you get depression. Whereas really what we need to do is, if it's on the skin level, you bring it out, you don't push it back in. So a physical illness is much easier to treat than an emotional or a mental illness. And people don't realize the connection between those three things. And modern medicine purely treats the symptoms as if the body is stupid, but the body is always acting, moving towards health, even by its expression of illness or dis-ease. So the third chakra, the mental body, is comprised of, on the right-hand side, the ego. And it is like a little impotent phallus. And at about 4 years of age, it was believing it's not home, it's not safe, it's not enough. And it was integrating with the family's similar feelings. So you could have an aloof mother who pulled back her energy and an intimidator father. Or you could have a poor me father and an interrogator mother. And your brother might have been, an aloof means you go, what's wrong? And you have to keep chasing them. Poor me is a victim. So these dynamics growing up, and we all have an expression of all of those in us, but we tend to go with one or the other. So the impotent ego mind is constantly in judgment of, am I safe? Have I got enough? Am I better or worse than him? And to the left-hand side, you've got the observer. And between the third chakra and the lower heart and the heart chakra is what I call the valley of shame. So if the ego feels shame, shame burns the ego up. So if your identity is with your ego, who you are, what people think about you, what you have, what you haven't got, how you look, then if that is challenged, you actually feel, and you totally identify with that, and you don't have a connection to self, then that is like death. So your behavior may seem strange, but it'll be logic in trying to keep together this false image of who you are. So the ego cannot do the necessary penetration through shame and piercing through the upper heart on its own. It requires the observer to wrap around this impotent phallus and to go through the shame valley of whatever it is, your personal shame. And then the ego dissolves and it penetrates through into the upper heart. Now, the lower heart chakra is control, envy, and it loves with a tight fist. And it has the envy there. When you pierce with the observer into the upper heart, that is the ultimate sexual act within a person. It is the ultimate act of creation. It is what creates the whole person. And it is the bridal chamber, it's called. And you pierce up through that and you're into the realm of the transformed. And the upper heart is allowing, it is accepting, it is joyful, and it has compassion, and it doesn't grasp. It's unconditional. And then you move up into the throat chakra, which is blue color. The heart is green. And that is your ability to express yourself. And your third eye is your connection to the creative force of spirit. And your crown is the direct connection to spirit. Now, the remarkable thing that happens is when the heart chakra is penetrated by the observer and that bridal intercourse happens within a person's being, suddenly the non-local body, and this is physics now, so the non-local body is the crown chakra that's connected to spirit. Through the heart chakra connects down to the local body, which is the root chakra. So you get this line coming down from the crown chakra through your energy system, through your heart, and it connects. So all of a sudden, you feel home, safe, and enough because you're connected to spirit. The third eye which is connected to the creative force of nature, connects down through the heart chakra into your second chakra and inspires it, and the ideas are created. And then the throat chakra will connect down through the heart into your identity. Now, on the mental body one, which is really important because it has created the universe as we perceive it and everything that's happening, because consciousness can make light into either a wave or a particle. So we're in effect what we think, as within, so without. The name for that in Indian terms is Manipura. And Manipura means your city of jewels. So it's really important that whatever avatar you're expressing yourself as, Joe or Lisa or whoever, that personality is allowed to be, who it is. But that personality is connected to an ego, which is childlike. And you don't destroy a child, but you don't let a child drive your car. So we need to identify that child. And when we're in a reaction mode, if somebody triggers us, we say, what is the name of what I'm feeling? Okay, it's embarrassment or shame. What age was I when I first felt that? Okay, I was 6. What happened? And you go back in time to that 6-year-old and you wrap your observer around it. And you time travel and you heal and you reclaim that part of yourself into the now. And you expand as a person. And that's a constant journey. And that's why the people who know and remember are so busy retrieving aspects of themselves and welcoming the challenges that the external gives them, because it gives them an opportunity to observe and wrap it around the ego and be the mother or the lover or the partner or the judge or the system that they don't have, and be that themselves and become a complete circle. So when you become a complete circle then, or you have the concept of it, it's a constant effort, attention to it, then hopefully you're lucky enough to meet another complete circle. And the part that you join in the middle is the relationship. And whether that's just for a split second when you're in a shop dealing with someone, or whether it's your marriage or your children. And if humanity can come back into that full circle, each individual, then like imaginal cells that happen in the heart, they will begin to come together like white blood cells, like an immune system. And at a certain tipping point, things will shift. So when you ask me about Tesla, chakra, and what people can do, it goes right back to what I always say. If I was in an elevator with you and you were panicking, I'd say, everything is okay. And I would mean that whether your leg was falling off, you were about to die, or somebody was about to put a bullet in your head, I'd say everything is okay, because it is. And I know that. I don't believe it. I know. Then I would ask you to close your eyes and tell me right now, this moment, what do you have? And allow the answer to come like an unstruck bell, like the Hatha. It doesn't matter if it's inappropriate. It doesn't matter if it's shocking. Learn to listen without judgment. What do I have? What do I want? What do I need? And you'll realize that often those three are not the same. What am I afraid of? And if I wasn't afraid, how would I be able to be authentic? They're the tough questions. So it's really easy to dive into Gnosticism and Archon and occult and the elite and the cabal and the da-da-da-da-da. If it's bringing your attention outside, then it's nothing but a distraction. And it doesn't matter whether it's true or false, because the only truth is the one that you know, that you have experienced, and that you can never explain. So when you've asked me to come on to a radio interview and you showed me some of the questions you were going to ask me, I smiled and I said, realistically, the only way I could answer this is to sit in front of you and say nothing. But that wouldn't make for good radio, really.
No, not at all. You explained that beautifully. And, understanding that crosshairs in the heart is, top is spiritual, bottom is matter. And it's feminine and masculine as well.
Yes.
Top being feminine and lower being masculine.
I often felt that the journey of a soul, and I'm speaking as a woman now, Joe, okay? I have this sort of I wouldn't call it a memory, it's sort of a familiar feeling that before I came here to this life, that I was standing in front of, and I can't explain it, the most perfect counterpart or love to me. And by counterpart, I mean as a synese. So, for example, silence plus creativity gives birth to idea. So they're the perfect counterparts. So as a consciousness, I was with my perfect counterpart. And as an Irish woman, I'm saying, let's say as a woman, I was with the perfect man or the perfect counterpart to me. And there was a knowing that I had to come here to this earth to experience, because that's what you have to do as consciousness and wisdom. You have to come and experience free will and life and expand with experience. So I had to leave this person or this aspect. And it was almost as if he shattered into billions of shards of glass, and I was born, and I could see elements of it sparkling everywhere. Like as a child, I could see it in the sunset. I felt it in music. I could see it in old people's eyes. Some teachers who inspired me, I would see this like a little broken shard of glass of an aspect of my true love. I could see it in animals and dogs. But with that, if you see a shattered tiny piece of something that was everything to you, there's joy every time you find a piece, and it's always accompanied as well by a loneliness. And that combination of feeling my entire life, of knowing that I left something which I will return to, which is why I don't fear death, because I know what I'm going home to. And in the meantime, my job is to identify and find the little shards of that aspect in as many places as I can find it, because it's playing hide and seek. And I can only speak from my point of view. My entire life, from my earliest memory, which is very early, up to now, is to look for those little tiny shards of glass. And when I get home, when I die, I will bring back all of those memories and experiences, and I will be enriched, and the entirety of consciousness will be enriched by my experience. So that's my very vulnerable and honest answer to your question, what is the meaning for life, is to play hide and seek with the divine and smile at its remarkable ability to appear in the most unlikely of places. And that is a glimpse of the unfathomable depth of love of which human spirit comes from. And when I see a person or a thing that don't have that in them, there's no judgment, because in a game of hide and seek, you always have to have places to look where you don't find it to make it into a game. And at the moments where I felt happiest in my life, I feel that loneliness. And at the times where life has thrown me curveballs that I think could have finished off a lot of people, I felt its arms wrap around me. And love is recognizing that. Unfortunately, you can recognize that in another person. If they don't know who they are, if they haven't got the courage to walk through the shame of their heart and soul, you can't do that for them. And that's often why relationships either break down when one person is attempting to be the full circle, or they tear apart and it's difficult, or there's an abandonment sense that if somebody feels you've taken away their connection to spirit. But every single one of us has to make that lonely journey from the third chakra mind through the shame into our heart. There's no shortcuts, Joe. There's no formula.
No, and I think with that, it takes practice.
And a commitment.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have to make a commitment to have a relationship with yourself. An authentic relationship with yourself is the most important and biggest commitment that you can ever make. And when you commit to making an authentic relationship with yourself, then try going out and walking into a restaurant that doesn't permit your fellow man to go in because they haven't taken some form of experimental jab. If people make that commitment to be authentic with the solemnity and the reverence and the knowing of how important it is, watch how the world transforms and watch the pyramid crumble.
I'm going to just wrap it up on one thing, and it's that 1%. And that 1% is very small. And that 1% has Mother Nature on their side.
Yes.
And if that 1% can go within and without judgment, without fear, then that 1% can consciously, physically matter, whatever word people want to use, change the outcome of humanity.
Yeah. And you know what, Joe? Maybe it doesn't take 1%. Maybe it just takes one person.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just Joe.
Yeah. Lisa, thank you for coming on to Dublin South FM. It's been the best, I have to say, in 4 years. It's been the most enjoyable interview I've had. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate your time. And anyone who's listening, there's a difference between information and knowledge. You are home, you are safe, and you are enough. And anything else is an illusion.
Yeah, quite the mind. Thank you.
And remember, here at Dublin South FM, we're interviewing plenty of people around the world, conscious leaders, and that's why we have the Conscious Business Podcast, which is part of the Conscious Business Academy, offering purpose, profit and prosperity in your life through soulful selling, mindful marketing, conscious leadership and creative culture. If you want to reach out to me, it's joedalton.ie. You have an awesome week and take care and look after yourself.